Hey everybody, this is Bobby Cannon. I am the Senior Network Engineer for NetStream Communications, which currently owns and operates Capital Internet and both 470 Exchange here in beautiful Atlanta. You can find our websites www.capitalinternet.com and www.470exchange.com, as well as www.netstreamcom.net. Anyways, like I said, my name is Bobby Cannon. I am the Senior Network Engineer. I've been doing IT work for going on 14 years now. In some sort of capacity or another. I've held multiple certifications. I'm not going to go into great detail about them, about everything that I've held, just because I would spend 15 minutes describing everything and how long it took me to get it. Anyways, thanks for tuning in for this first session of this podcast series that I will be doing, and hopefully many more to come. In regards to just educating everybody out there and helping everybody understand what a data center is and what to look for in a data center, as well as some other things I might do, like some product reviews and stuff like that later on in the future. So let's just go ahead and jump right into this and get started. The first thing that I wanted to talk about, the first series I wanted to do, was when does a small business know that it's time for them to upgrade or move their equipment into a data center for either physical co-location, either dedicated, which I'll cover in another podcast, as well as VPS that I'll cover in another podcast as well. So be sure to take a look at those when I get those out. But let's first talk about physical co-location. Now, whether or not you're here listening to this here in Atlanta or anywhere across the country, anywhere across the world for that matter, I'm hoping it will reach that kind of audience, but who knows. Of course, I'm gonna try to boost everybody. Hey, come look at my data centers. I'd love to have you guys as a client. But this is really geared for anybody out there, anywhere, of what you need to look at, questions you need to ask, things that just common things that you will need to find out in a data center. So let's just start off with the physical. Let's say the location of the data center. To me, location is kind of key. Because number one, if you're running a small business from your house or anything, how far is it from you? How long is it going to take you to drive there with, A, traffic, and B, no traffic? And see how easy is it to access the facility. Now, we do a lot of our backbone feeds into a large data center. I won't name names just for legal reasons. But I can tell you right now, when I go down there in the middle of the night, I am always looking over my shoulder trying to make sure that nobody's following me or anything else. It's not. I just don't feel very safe in that location. So then that's a big concern on a lot of people's mind is, hey, if I go down there to work on my equipment at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, do I got to worry about getting mugged or anything else while I'm going down there? I've went down to the data centers before at 2 or 3 in the morning, and my car has been broken into. I've went through 4 GPS systems. They love to steal my GPS for some reason. I've finally gotten smart enough to take it out and stick it in my bag when I go in now. Stolen my iPod on several occasions, and just a mess. But physical location is very important to some people. So you've got to look. You got to look at at where it's at compared to where you live or wherever your business is, and make sure that it's easily accessible. And number one, and that you're going to feel safe getting there. Another thing to look at when you're going into a data center is, hey, is the building, what kind of security is in the building? I know a lot of data centers that have guards. I know a lot of data centers that have armed guards. I know a lot of data centers that just have cameras with biometrics and key cards and all that, and the man traps and all that stuff set up. And that's all fine and dandy. It's just you got to make sure that there's some kind of security protocol in place, so that way nobody can just go in there, grab your equipment, and walk out. So make sure you check the security. Make sure see if they've got any cameras sticking around. That way if something happens, you make sure you're covered. Number two is, of course, do they own the building that they're in? Is the building owned by them? Is the building leased? Is it a perpetual lease? Is it a lease that ends in 5 years and they have to get out? How's the lease structured? Stuff like that. It doesn't hurt to ask, hey, do you guys own the building? If they say yes, we own the building, then there's the answer to your question. If they say no, we don't own the building, we lease it, then ask a couple more details about the lease. Hey, is it perpetual? Do you guys, they won't ever kick you out no matter what? In 5 years when your lease is up, are they going to make you leave? Or are we going to have to relocate our gear? Typically, the way leases are wrote, it's you lease it, as long as you keep paying your monthly lease bill, you can stay there as long as you want. So typically you don't have to worry about that. But if I was in your position of doing that, that would be one of the questions I ask, because you never know. I mean, these are things that you need to know when you go to tour a facility. And another thing you need to ask is, hey, do you guys operate, or do you own the backbone in which you push the data out? I have been to data centers when I was just a client doing tours, and saw that a lot of data centers out there do not actually own their own fiber network. They actually just lease, or get popped, point of presence as they're called, from somebody like Level 3, Global Crossing, which of course Global Crossing is fixing to become Level 3, and Cogent, Sprint, Verizon, Hurricane Electric, the guys like that. They'll just cross connect with these guys, or they'll actually have them put an actual physical fiber drop in the building, and then they'll run everything off of that. So you really got to make sure and focus on stuff like that, because to me, that's kind of a sensitive area. Because here's the thing, for instance, with NetStream Communications, we own our own fiber ring. We have 80 some odd miles of fiber here in Atlanta, and both our data centers are both plugged into our fiber, which is good for us because this gives us the ability to manage the ring. We are able to manage our fiber network, and we're actually able to see, using our monitoring software, if something is happening before anybody else can really, before the clients actually know something's going on. And then that we're able to take precautionary measures to make sure there's no service interruption. Typically with somebody who's just got a pop in their data center, they're just pulling a leased line off of, they're not going to know something's wrong until more than likely something happens, because they're not going to see that back end infrastructure, or they're not going to see behind that carrier's network to see what all's going on. Now, of course, just like any other data center, like me, for instance, I do cross-connect with bigger carriers. I cross-connect with Time Warner. I cross-connect with Level 3. I cross-connect with Sprint. I do cross-connect with them. And, of course, if something happens on their network, I can't do anything about that. But I've got enough redundancy built into it that if something happens, that none of my traffic's going to be interrupted, because of the way we've got the OSPF set up for, to optimize the paths. If I have to, I can down a port and it'll force everything out another port. So you've really got to look into that, because, of course, your company's success can only be measured on the availability of clients able to get to either your site or your databases or whatever you have online that you're trying to promote or sell. So, of course, look at that. Ask them about that. I'm not saying that's a bad thing if they don't own their own fiber network. I'm just saying it's kind of one of those flip side things. And of course, like I said before earlier in this cast, is I'm going to promote my data centers a lot, because of course that's where I work. So you've got that. Another thing to hit on is going to be power. I've been to data centers, luckily with being in the IT field as long as I have, almost 14 years, and seeing multiple data centers and everything else, I've actually come into data centers that were almost completely, they're at like 90% of their power utilization, and they can't get more power. So you've got to really look at that. So make sure and ask the question, how's your power? How much power do you have in the building? How much power can you accommodate for? If you run out of power, can you get more? So, those are questions you can ask as well. So make sure you ask those questions. Another thing is ACs, cooling. If it gets 90 degrees in a data center, guess what? The servers probably aren't going to last very long. So a big thing is when you walk into a data center, is it cool? I understand that stuff is geared, of course, in hot aisles and cold aisles. That's generally how they're done. But is it cool? When you walk into a data center, are you sitting there wiping the sweat off your head as you're walking in? Or is it cool and then you walk down a hot aisle and you get the sweat on your head? I mean, it's just basic, hey, is it cool? What's the thermostat set on? What's your humidity levels? Just basic general stuff like that. So you've really got to make sure that, the ACs are working, that everything's fine-tuned and everything like that. Probably the biggest thing I'm going to hit on right now is generators. Redundancy for power. Here's a big thing, and this is probably going to be one of the biggest things that will get you to move into a co-location facility data center versus keeping your business running from your house or wherever you're running it from, that doesn't have any kind of power backup. Let's say for scenario, you're running your website, and you're an e-commerce site, and everything you do, you sell something online. Well, that's all fine and dandy, but what happens when your power goes out at your house or your office and you don't have any kind of redundancy? Yeah, you might have a little battery UPS sitting there that might run it for another 30 minutes, but what happens if the power's not back up in there? I mean, more times than any, I've seen when the power goes out. For instance, at my house, when the power goes out, my power's out 2 or 3 hours, I'll be honest with you. I've never had a power outage that I've seen that's been out for 30 minutes and then back up, unless they're right on it nonstop. You just jumping all over it. That would probably be one of the biggest considerations to take into effect of when you're moving into a data center is look at the generators, make sure they have a generator. It doesn't matter if it's a diesel generator, a turbine, a natural gas, centrifugal, whatever, just as long as they have a generator. Another thing you need to really ask to understand about the generator is, hey, how often do you test it? How often is it maintained? Do you guys run tests on it yourselves, or do you have somebody else come out and run tests on it? And more than anything, I don't care if you're talking to a salesman when you walk into a data center. One of the questions you must ask is, what load are you at right now? And if that salesman has to get up and go get a facilities management person or go get the technician or whoever takes care of the generators, in my case, I would go and grab Matt Chandler from my data center and say, hey, Matt, this client's asking me what the load percentage is, and Matt could tell me, hey, we're running at 62% load when we're fully generator powered. You need to know that because what happens if you do not know what the load is, or if they can't tell you what the load is, then more than likely they're not going to know what it is, and so therefore you're not really going to know if the power cuts off, if your equipment's going to be protected. So that's probably one of the biggest key things you got to really watch out for. But anyways, guys, I'm going to go ahead and sign off of this one. I hope this has been informative to everybody and that I've given you enough information to know what questions to ask and what you need to do and everything. Again, if you have any questions, any concerns, if you just want to say, hey, thanks for all the info, Bobby, feel free to email me, bcannon@netstreamcom.net. That's NETSTREAMCOM.net. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have, any concerns, or if you just like to come by and take a look at the data centers, be my guest. I'd love to give you a tour of them, take you around and show you everything. Again, I'm not a salesman. I'm a network engineer, and this is one of my passions, is educating everybody on the things out there in the world that you really need to know. So anyways, I'm going to sign off, and I appreciate everybody taking the time to listen to this, and be sure to check my next podcast out when they come out. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.